Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Ever had one of those experiences that just completely rocks your world? Like you see everything differently afterward?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. It's one of the most amazing transformations in history.
Oh, yeah.
Malcolm X's journey to Mecca.
It's a wild one.
So Malcolm X, for anyone who needs a little refresher, was, a huge voice for Black Americans back in the 60s. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't talk about the civil rights movement without talking about Malcolm X. But
Right.
the thing is, to really get the full impact of this whole transformation,
Yeah.
we got to rewind a bit, get a feel for the world he was living in back then.
Paint us a picture.
Okay, so picture the U.S. in the 1960s.
Okay.
Segregation is the law of the land.
Yeah, separate but equal, right?
Right. Separate but equal on paper, maybe.
In theory, yeah.
But for Black Americans, true equality, I mean, that felt like a far-off dream,
Totally.
And this is key, because this is the reality that shapes Malcolm X. This is where his activism is born.
Yeah, it's like the soil where all these ideas take root.
Exactly. And so it's no surprise he becomes a prominent member of the Nation of Islam.
Which, just so everyone's on the same page,
Yeah.
that was a movement, right, that advocated for Black empowerment. And at the time, even separation from white society.
Right. And his message resonated with people, especially those who felt the full force of that racial injustice.
Yeah.
Who felt like the system
Was working against them.
Exactly. They saw a little hope for change.
Yeah. And then you have Malcolm X, and he's delivering these fiery speeches, this call for Black self-reliance.
Powerful.
It was a message of resistance, and people connected with that. People who felt voiceless.
He challenged the status quo head on, fearlessly.
That is not afraid of a confrontation.
But here's where it gets really interesting. 1963,
Okay.
Malcolm X starts expressing some disillusionment with the Nation of Islam,
Oh, wow. So he's like, wait a minute.
particularly with its leader, El-Hajj Muhammad.
So there's a rift forming.
There's tension. And this disillusionment, it's crucial. It creates this opening, this space, for a major shift in his thinking.
But he's at a crossroads.
Exactly. And he starts searching for truth, a journey that would take him thousands of miles away to Mecca.
Okay, so Mecca, huge deal.
Huge.
For Muslims, it's not just any city.
It's the holiest city in Islam. Every year, millions of Muslims, millions, from all walks of life, all over the world, they converge on Mecca for the Hajj, which is a pilgrimage, like a central pillar of their faith.
I can only imagine being there. What a powerful experience.
It's about shedding your worldly possessions,
Wow.
putting on these simple white garments, and you're literally shoulder to shoulder with people from every corner of the globe,
Wow.
all united in prayer, no distinctions, race, nationality, social status, it all fades away.
It's going to be humbling.
It is. And for Malcolm X, who had only ever known a world divided, sharply divided along racial lines, this was a revelation.
It's like the world just exploded open. His whole worldview shifted.
Completely. It challenged everything he thought he knew.
And we actually get to see this transformation unfold, right? In real time, because he wrote letters from Mecca.
He did. Incredible letters. These letters give us this amazing window into how his thinking was evolving.
So he's processing this whole experience as he's going through it.
Yeah. In one letter, he writes, America needs to understand Islam, because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem.
Wow. So he's saying that Islam holds the key.
That's how he saw it at that moment.
It's huge.
It is. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to write, the white man is not inherently evil, but America's racist society influences him to act evilly.
You can almost feel his perspective broaden as he's writing.
Right. It's like he's seeing the world through a new lens.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see the seeds of his later shift toward universal brotherhood.
Instead of seeing that black and white, us versus them, he's starting to see that shared humanity.
He's realizing that the racism he'd experienced wasn't necessarily because of white people themselves, but because of a flawed system.
The system itself was the problem.
And that's a radical idea for that time.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we have Malcolm X. He goes to Mecca, has this life-altering experience, and then he comes back to America a changed man.
Right. But how did that change actually manifest? How did he take this deeply personal spiritual experience and turn it into action? That's the heart of it, right? It's how do we take these really profound and personal experiences and turn them into action? you know?
Right, because it's one thing to have this, like, internal shift,
Right.
but how do you bring that into the world?
Exactly. And for Malcolm X, this wasn't just some quiet internal thing. He came back on fire.
Oh, yeah, he was ready to make waves.
Absolutely.
And one of the first things he does is change his name to El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz.
Right.
I remember learning about that, but honestly, I never fully got the significance.
It's huge.
Yeah.
On the surface, it's like, okay, he's embracing Sunni Islam.
Right.
It's a break from the Nation of Islam.
Right.
But it's so much deeper than that.
Okay. Yeah, unpack that a little bit.
He's choosing a name that reflects this whole transformed worldview.
Okay.
It's not just Malcolm X anymore.
Right, not just the activists.
Right. He's El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz,
Sure.
a citizen of the world,
Yeah.
connected to this global Muslim community
Yeah.
and committed to fighting injustice everywhere.
So it's like his fight for equality, it goes global.
Exactly.
He's seeing these connections, the struggles of Black Americans.
Yes.
It's all part of this much bigger fight against oppression.
It's all connected. And it's important to understand, this wasn't about abandoning the fight for racial justice in America.
Right, he wasn't turning his back on that.
No. He still cared deeply about that struggle. But he recognized that it was part of something bigger. These struggles against oppression,
Yeah.
they're all connected.
He was like connecting the dots between racism,
Yes.
colonialism, poverty.
It's all related.
He saw them as different sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And for that time,
Yeah.
that was radical.
Yeah, no one was really talking about it like that.
The civil rights movement was largely focused on achieving equality for Black Americans within the existing system.
Working within the system to make things better.
Right. But Malcolm X,
Yeah.
he comes back with this broader critique. He's challenging people to see the limitations of fighting for equality within a system that was inherently designed
To benefit some.
Yes,
At the expense of others.
exactly. He realized that true liberation meant dismantling these oppressive systems.
Not just reforming them.
Exactly, dismantling them in America
Mm-hmm.
and globally.
Okay, and that's where the Organization of Afro-American Unity comes in, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that, because,
This was huge for Malcolm X.
yeah, I don't know much about it.
It wasn't about replacing other civil rights groups. It was about offering a different approach.
Okay.
He saw it as this platform for Black Americans to connect with the global Pan-African movement because they were fighting similar battles.
So it's about solidarity, building those bridges.
Exactly. He knew the fight for freedom and equality, it went beyond borders.
It's a global struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where his message takes on this whole other dimension.
It's not just about America anymore.
It's about human rights.
Worldwide.
He's calling for self-determination, economic justice, an end to all forms of oppression.
Wow. And he's using his own experiences to make that case. His understanding of Islam.
It's powerful
It's a powerful message.
and dangerous to some.
Oh, yeah. I bet those in power weren't thrilled.
Not at all.
Eh.
He was a threat to the status quo in America
Yeah.
and around the world, challenging the very foundations of power.
And people in power, they don't like that.
Did you not?
This all paints such a vivid picture of the man and his journey. But for our listeners, maybe they're not as familiar with him. What are some of the key takeaways? Like, what should we all remember about Malcolm X and his legacy? This all paints such a vivid picture of the man and his journey. But for our listeners, maybe they're not as familiar with him. What are some of the key takeaways? Like, what should we all remember about Malcolm X and his legacy?
Oh, that's the question, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
it's something that people are still grappling with today. But for me,
Yeah.
Malcolm X's legacy, it really boils down to the power of self-reflection
Mhm.
and growth,
Right. Like, he was never afraid to question his own beliefs.
Exactly. And to change his mind.
Yeah.
When he was presented with new information, he wasn't afraid of growth.
And that's huge because these days it feels like everyone's so stuck in their own corners.
It's true. But Malcolm X showed us we can have strong convictions
Yeah.
and still be open to change. He was always searching, always pushing himself to understand different perspectives.
He didn't shy away from challenging the status quo either.
No, he did not.
But it wasn't just about speaking truth to power, right? He wanted to give power back to the people.
Absolutely. He believed in self-determination,
Yeah.
like people having the agency to control their own destinies. He was always urging Black Americans
Yeah.
and all oppressed people, really,
Right.
to take control of their own narratives, their own institutions.
Their own futures. It's like he was saying, don't wait for someone else to give you power. Claim it for yourself.
Exactly. And, another thing that's so relevant today,
Yeah.
he was amazing at connecting all these different struggles.
What do you mean?
He showed how Racism, colonialism, poverty, these aren't separate issues. They're all connected. Systems of oppression.
It's all part of the same system.
And by making those connections, he broadened the whole fight for justice,
Yeah.
inspired people all over the world to challenge these systems.
It's really incredible when you think about it. He was so ahead of his time.
He was. And it's tragic. He was assassinated just a year after his pilgrimage. It makes you wonder what else he could have accomplished.
Right. What would the world look like?
We'll never know. But his legacy lives on. It's inspiring people to this day. Activists, artists, educators,
Yeah.
regular people, all striving to make a difference. He reminds us that change is possible, but it takes courage.
Conviction.
Yes, and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
And sometimes it takes a journey to do that, whether it's a physical trip
Right.
or just a journey of the mind to really shake things up, see the world in a new light.
He showed us that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we take within ourselves.
Powerful. Well, on that note, we'll leave you with this. What journeys have shaped your worldview? Are there any journeys you need to take? To challenge your own understanding, think about it. And thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the life and legacy of Malcolm X.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.